Jeff Coate here from Industrial Alchemy, and today I'm going to be working on replacing a couple of those foundation blocks that you can see behind me. And in just a moment I'll turn the camera around and show you what the problem is. There's a couple that are completely destroyed and need to be replaced. Over here you can see that there are a couple that are in bad shape. So I'm definitely going to be replacing this one here that's in the center of the screen. Possibly I'm going to dig out the one next to it and replace that too. We'll see. Down there, that one is cracked, but I think I'm probably just going to clear out that dirt that's pushing in and fill it with concrete. This entire corner is going to be filled with concrete. So I think that would be sufficient for that one. So definitely replacing that one on the corner, possibly the one next to it. And also you can see all those spaces in between the blocks where there should be mortar, and there isn't. So with whatever leftover mortar I have today, I'll repoint some of that. Oh, and this, I've mentioned this before, but this block is what's known as clay tile block. It was very popular here in the 1920s, and I'm not going to be able to replace it with what's actually there. Of course, you can't get that anymore. And the ones that I've found, that I've seen that are available for salvage, are a different style. So I'm just going to go ahead and put concrete block down in there. It's actually the exact same size as this tile block. And in the future, I mean, it's down at the bottom, so it's really not that noticeable, but in the future I may do some stucco and faux painting, etc., to make it match better. But for now, we're just going for structural. So that's what I'll be working on today. Okay, you can see as I've started to uncover here that one block at the bottom that I thought I might be able to just fill with concrete, this side of it was in bad enough shape and falling apart that I decided it'd be best to replace that block. I mean, it's the corner. The corners are the most important parts of the foundation. And you may be wondering how I can just take these blocks out. And part of it is I have the house supported. There is no actual weight on that corner of the foundation right now. I've got it all jacked up and supported, and so that's a concern in the corner. You want to get the weight off of it, but in a masonry wall you can usually take out a piece or two at a time and replace it. The rest of it will hold together, and depending on what type of construction it is and how thick, like if it's a brick wall that's 3 layers of brick thick, then you can take out a lot more at a time because you've got 2 other layers that are holding things up. But this is block, so each individual piece is quite large, but even so I can still take a little bit out and replace it as I go. So that's all I have for now. Back to work. Hello again. Now you can see with a bit of work here I've gotten both of those blocks out. Basically I wasn't reusing these blocks, they were already broken, so I just broke them apart. That was the easiest way to get them out. Obviously, if you're taking something out that you need to reuse, then you wouldn't want to do that. You'd have to just chip out the mortar and carefully pry it out. But I've got the blocks out. You can look into the basement down there. I removed the mortar, cleaned everything up. So the next step is I'm going to dry fit those blocks just to make certain, and then I'm going to mix up some mortar and get them in there. Alright, I have now mixed up some mortar. I'm using Type S mortar mix. I can do that because this block is pretty hard. This is a hard mortar, strong. It's what's standard now for modern block and brick. If you have an old brick house, then you need to find out how soft your bricks are. Because if you have soft bricks, well, let me back up a moment. Your mortar always has to be softer than the material, your blocks or your bricks. Because the mortar is what it has to be replaced periodically. It's what is meant to fail if anything is going to fail. And so if you have a house that is built out of very old bricks, they are soft because the firing processes and manufacturing processes were not as good as they are now. And if you use hard mortar, like this Type S, on soft brick, what will happen is, especially if you live someplace with a freeze-thaw cycle, with the expansion and the contraction and the changes of temperature, what's going to happen is the mortar is not going to move. The bricks are going to break. The front of the brick will break right off over the years if you've used mortar that is too hard. And over time it will completely destroy your bricks. So if you have a house that's 100 years or more old, find out how hard your bricks are first before you start messing around with your mortar. If you do have very soft bricks, you can get Type O or Type N. Type O is really, really soft. Type N is sort of in between. Those are okay. You can also look up the recipes online, but you can add lime to these various mortar mixes to make them softer. But there is also an option, if you've got the money for it, to get actual lime mortar from a restoration company. Over in this part of the country, I know Limeworks over in Pennsylvania has good products, but there are others around the country. So that, a little bit of a digression here, but lime mortar, actual lime mortar like they have, it's a special kind of lime, and it actually gets stronger over time. It continues to cure a little bit at a time, so it just gets stronger and stronger, and as it's doing that, it's absorbing water. So it actually helps keep the walls dry by absorbing any moisture that happens to get in and using it to cure further. But that's enough of a digression about mortar. You're going to need less water than you might think to mix this up. So start with less than you think, because it doesn't take much. And you want to have just enough water that you can work it. And like if you scoop it up, it stays on your trowel. It doesn't go slopping off. If it's so dry that it's crumbly, then it needs a little bit more water. So this is sort of the consistency you're looking for. It's kind of hard to describe, but you know, it's got a give to it. It stays together, but it's not sloppy. Anyway, now I'm going to go apply some of this. I'm not sure if I'm going to record that or not. We'll see if I can set it up. But I would also like to make a statement that I am not a mason, and I am sure that my techniques could perhaps use some improvement. But, you know, it works. It may not be pretty, but it works. So, anyway, you might get to see me put it on in place if I can get the camera set up right, but we'll see. Hello again. No process videos because it turns out it's been a while since I've done any masonry and I'm out of practice. So this is not the prettiest job I've ever done, but it's done. It'll work. I am going to put some stucco over top of those blocks too, because they turned out to be just a little bit smaller than the original. So I set them so they're not quite flush, and that'll give me space to put the stucco layer on. And I used all of my leftover mortar and got a little bit of pointing done. Plenty more still to do, but it's time to move on to my next task. Well, friends, the day has ended in a bit of a disaster. See, I was pouring concrete down into that corner, and it turns out one of those blocks was not strong enough to hold concrete inside of it. Yep, poured a little bit of concrete in and it just fell apart. So I'm going to have to scrape that concrete out and cut off that rebar. And I'm going to have to get another concrete block to replace that one. So I guess I'm cleaning up today, and I don't really have time to go get the block and put it in today, so I guess that will wait for tomorrow. But, you know, these things happen when you're working on an old house. Sometimes things aren't as strong as you thought they were, and they fall apart, and you have to change your plan, and that's okay. So this will probably be the last video for today, because all I'm going to do is clean this mess up and find something to do with the rest of the concrete that I have. And I'll be back at it tomorrow.